This crash just goes to show how quickly things can go wrong. Clean launch turned into disaster when the tyres lose grip. Car slid sideways, caught the edge and started rolling. Metal scraping and parts flying everywhere as it tumbled off the side of the track. Definitely a quick change of underwear needed.
Oh boy. Oh no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
Next up, we're at the Willsboro Speedway when two unidentified drivers set off fairly evenly until one of the cars, a Mustang, slowly began veering to the left before hitting a guardrail and dramatically smashing into two pieces on a metal tower before coming to a halt. Luckily, the driver walked away from the incident totally unscathed. Next up, we're at the 2009 Andra Pro Series Top Door Slammer, where John Zappia was closing in on the record for all-time wins. Straight after setting off from the line, both drivers went through a pretty violent tyre shake, but while his competitor kept it in a straight line, Zappia's left-hand tyre gripped the track and sent him headfirst into the opposite wall.
.981 to the 60 for Maurice Fabiani, big moment for John Zappia! Goodness me!
On impact, sparks flew as his bonnet completely detached itself from the car, before skating down the strip along the side of the barrier. Fortunately, Zappia was okay, but Maurice Fabietti took the win, ending Zappia's win streak. Shannon Paul's Mardi Gras matchup turned into mayhem in seconds. His nitrous-powered Vette reared up near the finish, went completely airborne and barrel rolled through the shutdown area. Flames erupted as fuel lines tore apart on impact. It was pure luck that Paul was conscious and alert after that one. In 2022, Tommy Youmans suffered one of the most terrifying crashes in drag racing history at the Alabama International Dragway. Having smashed personal record times the week before in testing, Youmans should have been full of confidence in his GTO. That is, until wind got underneath his car, and in a scene that looks utterly incredible, his car began sailing and almost floating through the air at 200 miles per hour. It sailed over the left-hand barriers before smashing back down to earth on the grass patch. Tommy was transferred straight to hospital where he underwent surgery but thankfully made a full recovery.
Another driver who knows a thing or two about rolling drag cars is Jerry Caminito. He darted off the line and was having a great run, but right at the very end, his luck switched. Caminito lost control of his car and was sent headfirst towards the metal Armco barrier. As soon as he hit it, his car erupted into flames and split into a million pieces, as if a bomb had gone off inside. The cockpit that Caminito was sitting in got tossed over the wall and instantly started rolling, all while traveling at over 200 miles per hour.
His Blue Thunder Nitro funny car crashes head-on into the guard wall.
He took a nasty series of hits off the ground and was subjected to a horrible impact right at the end, in one of the worst drag racing crashes ever. When you increase the speed, the danger usually increases too. Just ask Steve Torrence. The Texan was the top fuel points leader when he entered this second round of eliminations in 2017 in Dallas. His run had gone well, and he beat his competitor Richie Crampton. But just as Steve crossed the finish line, his dragster lost control at over 300 miles per hour. As his rear left tire failed, the engine exploded dramatically and the car smashed the concrete wall extremely hard. It quite literally split in half before veering across the track and hitting the concrete wall. Pretty much every driver's worst nightmare. First up is this awful moment for Jerry Yeoman in what is definitely one of the most intense crashes in drag racing history. He suffered this huge crash in 2001 at the Wichita International Raceway, where he experienced a horrible barrel roll just moments after starting his run. He was racing Jim Wiens in the Pro Mod final of the Wichita Summer Nationals. The naturally aspirated Pontiac that Jerry was driving veered left violently at the 1/8 mile marker, and at this moment there was no coming back. It sent the car over the barrier, where it exploded in a ball of flames and rolled over a dozen times before coming to a stop at the quarter-mile mark. It's a complete miracle that he survived that one, if you ask me. Now, do you think you've seen some bad crashes involving Corvettes? Well, think again, because what you're about to see is the biggest Corvette crash ever. He completely lost control of his Corvette. It got sideways on him in a big way and aimed him directly towards the unforgiving concrete wall. The car went airborne and had a massive hit with the wall, instantly smashing up his car and flipping him over the wall. The car started to wildly turn and roll in every way imaginable, and he made horrible impacts with the ground as the car got more and more smashed up with every hit.
Oh, Sydney got some oh, hang on there, Sydney Frigo. Into the wall, top end, over and over, and a wild one there. Sydney moving around.
It was definitely one of the scariest crashes in recent history. And if you're enjoying these wild wrecks, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing for more motorsports content just like this. Another popular side of drag racing is when modified street supercars battle each other on the strip, and while it's entertaining, it's not what these machines are truly built for, so accidents are far from uncommon. Take this Audi R8 as an example. It was likely producing well over 1,500 brake horsepower, and when the driver tried to use all of it, well, the car didn't respond kindly. It started losing control almost straight away, sliding all across the track, and before the driver knew it, things got completely out of hand. It kicked left and sent the driver ridiculously hard into the concrete wall head first. The contact was devastating, smashing the front of the car and sending it into a long spin. I bet the driver wishes they kept it stock after that one.
Jay Payne's Pro Mod started shaking right off the line. Fighting for control, he tagged the wall hard, sending pieces of his car flying across both lanes, bounced into the opposite wall in what looked like slow motion. Somehow, he walked away from that one, which is amongst his most terrifying crashes.
Whoa, Jay Payne is way over by the wall. That thing is sideways, and Payne is hard into the wall at the top end.
Jim Reed didn't make it far down the strip before disaster struck. His car started to wobble and he quickly lost control, hitting the slippery grass on the side. His car was flung across the track and he started bouncing uncontrollably towards the wall on the other side. The barrier wasn't enough to keep Reed's car inside the track, and it got launched straight over it, instantly flipping over into a massive barrel roll. But the worst part came when Reed smashed into a 40-foot metal billboard sign at an unbelievable speed, instantly destroying his car.
Slewed out of control and snapped a 40-centimetre thick concrete pole as it burst into flames.
Flames erupted and the cockpit was torn apart from the rest of the car, sending Reed tumbling down the grass on fire. He was lucky to be alive after this utterly insane incident. With that being said, let's check out the time when Tim Gross cheated death. He had just shot out of the gates in the 1980 Spring Nationals when he was taken for a very scary ride. His car became too much for him as it became unstable going down the track, throwing him off course completely. And once he went sideways, it was the beginning of the end. He crashed so hard into the Armco barrier that it bent his car straight down the middle and fired him towards the other fence for even more punishment. The second hit was the biggest, with the car going straight over the fence and breaking up on impact. The cockpit that Gross was sitting in began rolling down the track at crazy speed and broke into a huge ball of fire almost instantly. It was left battered up, tangled in the fence and on fire as Gross fought for his life to escape the wreck. Back in 1997, Eddie Hill had this monster crash in Sonoma when competing in the NHRA. He was driving his dragster and had a good launch, but he was in for a nasty surprise. The car started breaking away at the very end of his run, and as he pulled the parachute, the whole rear of the car broke off and the front snapped in two, in one of the most bizarre accidents ever seen. It slid up the track at incredible speed, and as the rear axle was seen flipping down the tarmac on its own, Hill's cockpit smashed into the wall and flew into the gravel trap. It went airborne, flipping through the sand at huge speed and bashing him around inside the cockpit. Not the ideal way to come to a stop.
Watching your car turn into confetti isn't exactly what you sign up for in drag racing. This driver's car just exploded mid-run. Parts went flying everywhere, left him sliding down the track in what was basically just a frame with wheels. At 200 miles per hour with the accelerator floored, there's only one thing standing between you and disaster: your brakes. So when Matt Abel realised that his parachute hadn't fully deployed while he was cruising down the strip, I think there was probably some panicking going on under his helmet.
Surely Zap stays there, and he does.
What do you got, Matt? What do you got?
Yeah, he just gets stronger as the night goes on. Oh, he also hasn't got shoots, though. That's what he's not got.
No!
This is going to go real deep, Wade. I don't think that's stopping. Oh, over and over in the deep end. Matt Abel, that's big.
Oh, man. Just when he catches a break.
For Matt, thankfully, there's a long runoff area of gravy before any walls or barriers, but that didn't stop him from turning and flipping multiple times at high speeds. Luckily, Matt got out of his car unscathed. Still just not able to catch a break. No pun intended.
And when it comes to barrel rolls, it doesn't get much crazier than this one. Ronnie Socks was giving it his all when his car suddenly leaked oil onto the track, and then he ran over it himself. It caused him to completely lose control of his car, step out, and almost hit the wall hard. The car rolled over, and due to the massive speed he was carrying, he had the craziest sequence of barrel rolls ever seen, rolling an unbelievable 13 times. To make things worse, the engine then burst into flames and his car was completely destroyed. It's impossible to imagine how that last crash would have felt inside the car, but Jason Griemer experienced something similar firsthand. It was 2022 and the fourth round of eliminations at the NHRA Midwest Nationals in St. Louis was taking place. Driver Jason Griemer was having a good run in his popular competition eliminator car, but everything changed in a split second. He was almost at the end of his run and was traveling at incredible speed, but out of nowhere the car decided to get airborne and veer violently to the right. As the car was soaring through the air, it made heavy contact with the concrete wall before flipping over again and bursting into flames. As parts flew off his car, it came to a stop on the racetrack after all the drama, but the car was well and truly cooked.
Although he managed to escape an accident against his competitor, Stevie Fast, Dwayne Mills had his own fair share of accidents throughout the years, including this one at Lights Out 6. As his nose tilted towards the sky, there was nothing he could do to bring it back down, and before he knew it, all four wheels were in the sky before he crashed back down to the barrier and skidded across the track. Thankfully, he was okay. The pass looked perfect until he hit the brakes. That's when the whole car lit up like a torch. Fire wrapped the cockpit while he fought to get stopped. Those few seconds before he got out felt like forever.
He spun around, got the wall and rolled it over on top end, got a fire up there. George Williams, that beautiful Camaro.
And next up, we have Gary Page on his return to Funny Car in 1994 in Santa Pod, England. The crowd holds its breath as Gary gets away nicely, keeping in total control of the car down the straight before disaster strikes. Seemingly out of nowhere, Gary's engine right in front of him bursts into flames at 200 miles per hour. As he manages to get it to slow down, he veers to the right hand side before tumbling over on the grass. But now you can hear the silence across the whole crowd as the tension builds. Gary is likely to have been unable to breathe in there with all the smoke and foam building in his car.
She's not been in a funny car for 3 years. We've been waiting to see this superb control from Gary all the way through, and then suddenly, what every funny car driver dreads, a fireball. That engine that's in front of him has let go, causing that whole car, and he rolls. The car rolls, and where is Gary now? All we can see is smoke. The car's the right way up. Now there is an escape hatch in the roof, and that is Gary's only way up.
But thankfully, after a few seconds, the roof of his car opens up and Gary manages to step out.
And if we're talking about completely destroying cars, we have to mention Antron Brown's insane crash in Atlanta in 2014. When you step into a car that can travel at well over 300 miles per hour, yes, 300, it's fair to say that you're taking a bit of a risk. And in 2014, Antron Brown's worst nightmare came true. Near the end of his run, when he was at top speed, the rear of his car failed without warning. With zero chance to react, he was fired straight into the concrete wall and his car instantly blew up, knocking off almost every part possible and wrecking the chassis. The car slid across the track and into the other wall, with a spectacular string of sparks flying from the car.
Wow, kaboom! Oh, an Antron. Big time crash top into the racetrack.
Spectators watched on in disbelief, fearing the worst after this horrific smash. There was another bad surprise for this thrill-seeking supercar owner at the TX2K22 meeting. These Nissan R35 GTRs are well known for being able to produce over 2,000 brake horsepower, and this one was no exception. On the exact same piece of tarmac as the Audi R8 I showed you a minute ago, the GTR completely lost traction and shot to the left of the track at high speed. But this time the driver tried to catch it, and sort of did, but when it avoided the wall, it just turned around and shot towards the other wall instead. It took a huge hit off the concrete, even bending the wall from the force of the impact. The car was completely wrecked, and the driver came away with nothing but a long repair bill.
Identical 60 foot's nearly. Oh, boy, Jensen way out of shape. Hold on to it, hold on to it. Oh, big side slap into the wall down there from Bradley Jepson.
Most drag crashes happen at the start. If you wreck at the finish, you've got a chance. This driver found out the hard way, rolling onto the grass past the line. Messy, but that extra shutdown area probably kept things from getting worse. In Santa Pod once again, this time 9 years earlier, Graham Ellis suffered a similar accident. Graham was in a Superbird Pro mod before disaster struck. After he lost control of the car and it began veering left, Ellis was just a mere passenger, tumbling over itself multiple times as it smashed into the barrier, and the car seemingly exploded into millions of metal flakes flying into the air. But luckily, Graham managed to come out relatively unhurt.
Another driver who escaped death was Mark Talafero in 2014. He was racing his powerful top alcohol dragster and had a very scary moment. While he was trying to put his crazy amount of horsepower down onto the track, the car broke away from him in the biggest way possible. He flew out of control straight towards the wall and smashed it head on. The car instantly bent and broke into pieces and erupted into a fireball. It rolled up the track and was shredded apart by the wall, all while Talafero was still inside. When the car finally came to a rest, there was debris everywhere, and safety workers hurried to rescue Talafero from the mangled metal. Now let's take a trip over to England, where spectators visit Santa Pod Raceway to see action, high speeds, and crazy passes. Two California drag racers, Geneva Nash and John Richardson, got a bit too close for comfort in this surreal smash in 2023. They were racing in the third round of Top Dragster eliminations at Pomona and made it about halfway through the run before complete chaos unfolded. Nash lost control of her dragster and began swerving across the track, making it fully into Richardson's lane. She narrowly missed him twice before smashing into him and flipping his car over instantly. The speed the cars rolled was shocking, and Nash barrel rolled numerous times up the track with debris flying everywhere. Both were taken to hospital, but somehow missed out on any injuries in this huge wreck.
Night racing looks spectacular until it goes wrong. Driver tagged the wall hard in the dark, went airborne throwing sparks everywhere. Luckily, there wasn't any fire to add to that light show. Now, get ready for one of the most spectacular drag crashes of all time. Steve Collier, competing against Monroe Guest at Topeka, Kansas, launched off the starting line after a rain-delayed start. When he got up to speed, his wheelie bar failed and his nose climbed higher and higher until he was almost vertical at 200 miles per hour.
And immediate tire smoke for Monroe Guest, who went, whoa, no, a blowover at the top end of the racetrack. Steve Collier's car stood up on end and turned over backwards.
Luckily, he managed to land the right way up before sliding backwards all the way down the strip until gliding to a halt, a stark reminder of the dangers in drag racing.
And on this day in 1990, they saw a horrific crash. Darrell Gwynn was racing his Top Fuel car, and it seemed to be going smoothly. Until tragedy struck just before the finish line. When it veered to the left and hammered the wall, the car's frame split instantly and struck a guardrail. It then burst into flames and slid down the track, with Gwynn's left arm pinned underneath. As a result, Gwynn was tragically paralyzed from the chest down, and doctors were unable to save the lower part of his left arm. A similar incident happened in 2007 when John Force and Kenny Bernstein had an unforgettable coming together in Dallas. They were racing their funny cars at the Texas Motorplex in round 2 and almost made it to the end of their run smoothly, but when Force pulled his parachute, all hell broke loose. The rear end of his car exploded, sending him hard into Bernstein's lane. He smashed into the side of him and pushed him into the wall at a disturbing angle, with both cars hitting the concrete extremely hard. They broke into pieces and slid hundreds of feet up the track before coming to a stop. John suffered minor injuries, but was lucky to survive this insane accident, while Kenny retired from drag racing again at the end of the year.
Well, John was a little late. And John, big crash. John has a problem with his car. He comes across, he hits Bernstein. Both cars continue on. John's car is torn well up.
American drag racer and 8-time NHRA champion Tony Schumacher is no stranger to winning, but unfortunately he's no stranger to crashing either, especially at Memphis. The legendary racer had 2 of the biggest accidents of his entire career in the same place, just 3 years apart.
During daylight, these crashes hit different. Every painful detail is in plain view as the car twists up, slams hard, and starts coming apart. No shadows to hide behind, just raw physics doing its worst. Now we've got a crash that resembles an aeroplane taking off much more closely than a drag race. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, Daniel Farris's Corvette's nose lifted at around 250 miles per hour as he caught air underneath the car and almost floated in the air for a few hundred feet, before dramatically slamming back down to earth and skidding to a halt. After the crash, it was found that his brand new carbon fiber front end played a huge role in the crash as he flew across the surface. As Daniel himself put it, he was taking flight as if he was heading to the Bahamas.
During the opening round of eliminators at the Lucas Oil NHRA Nationals, Doug Gordon had one of the most frightening moments a drag racer could imagine. The 2020 NHRA Top Alcohol Funny Car World Champion was driving his Camaro and lost the race by the slightest of margins. But losing the race wasn't the worst thing that happened to him. Just as he crossed the finish line, his car made a hard left turn and flipped instantly. It smashed into the retaining wall hard and was torn to pieces. It slid down the track, with the bodywork completely ripped from the car and Gordon still inside, in one of the scariest moments in recent memory.
And look at that, up on its side, upside down and into the wall. Down there, riding on top of the wall.
First up is his horrific crash from the year 2000, where he hit the wall at 320 miles per hour. That's over 510 kilometers per hour. The car snapped to the right, and before he knew it, he hit the concrete wall and was barrel rolling violently on the grass. The car was breaking up more and more with each hit, and the cockpit was thrown an outrageous distance with him trapped inside. It's hard to see how a human can survive that, but Tony did and returned for more. When he returned for more though, he would have been hoping it was more winning and not more crashing. But just 3 years later, he was the victim of this vicious accident. In the Mid-South Nationals qualifying, he was having a decent run against the other legendary driver, Larry Dixon. Dixon's car jumped off the ground, and he lifted off the throttle to avoid crashing, but Schumacher kept his foot in, and it didn't end well. His car lost control at tremendous speed, creating the shocking scene where his car literally exploded and flew straight into the air. It flipped mid-air for good measure, and by the time he smashed off the ground hard, his car was already broken into a million pieces. Debris was scattered everywhere in what was honestly one of the most terrifying crashes in drag racing history.
Tony Schumacher in the top fuel class. At 300 miles an hour, his rail simply breaks in half. Tony Schumacher goes flying in the air. Miraculously, he suffered a minor sprained knee.
In drag racing, it's usually good sportsmanship not to take out your competitor when you crash, right? Well, this one driver obviously missed that memo completely, lost it, and went straight into the other lane, turning one wreck into two. Next up, we're at the Santa Pod track in 2002 at the Top Fuels finals, where Mikael Kagrad is up against the rookie Brit Daryl Bradford. Both drivers got away cleanly, with Mikael taking the lead, but once both drivers looked to deploy their parachutes, it all went wrong for Kagrad.
Second bracket with the Barco sponsor machine, and they're off and running. Kagrad out in front. Great run from Michael Kagrad, and things have gone seriously wrong here. Oh, look at this. The car, the tyres have let go. Michael Kagrad has gone into the field. Everything has come off of that car.
While his competitor slowed down smoothly, Mikael suddenly swerved to the right before slamming into the wall, and an explosion of metal and carbon fibre appeared, showering the grass patch beside the strip. Easily one of the most frightening accidents in drag history.
Talking about scary moments, drag racing crashes don't get more violent than this one. Bruce Allen and Kenny Koretsky collided during their qualifying pass, and it made for perhaps the most spectacular crash that turned everyone in the grandstand silent. Allen lost control of his car and it swerved across the track, straight into the path of Koretsky. With nowhere to go, Koretsky drove straight into him at full speed. The impact split Allen's car in half. The cars exploded and Allen's engine was smashed into pieces, with debris from both cars flying everywhere and flames bursting from the scene of the wild accident. World champion Brittany Force was racing in Pomona in 2018 when her car dramatically caught fire and flipped over. Force was racing Terry Haddock in the first round of the eliminations at the Lucas Oil Winter Nationals when things turned dark pretty quickly. Her 11,000 brake horsepower Monster Energy dragster suddenly lost control during the pass and smashed straight into the concrete wall. It flipped onto its side and slid across the track, hitting the other wall and breaking the entire front of her car off. Just imagine how terrifying that would be from inside the cockpit.
Like that.
Whoa!
Oh, hang on, Brittany! Brittany's car smokes the tires, gets sideways, crosses the center line, pancaked the left wall, came back across the track, and it has come to a stop down at the far end.
This yellow Chevy driver, however, shows some real class though. When things went wrong, he steered hard into the wall to avoid his competitor, destroyed his car, but kept his crash to himself. Now, the thing to remember about these drag cars is that although they weigh more than a couple of £1,000 and are sometimes up to 15 feet in diameter, they can still be tossed around the air like it's absolutely nothing. And unfortunately, this is what got the better of Andy Robinson at the MSA British Drag Racing Championship finale in 2018. The six-time champion started well, but as he tried to make a save, he overreacted and ended up sending his car into the wall and tumbling through the air as a result. Robinson was lucky the car didn't land on the roof first, and he avoided serious injury.
Another wild accident unfolded for driver Leah Pruitt as she piloted her Top Fuel dragster in the 2020 Midwest Nationals. When accelerating with over 10,000 brake horsepower, she was halfway down the strip. Out of nowhere, her car literally split in two while traveling in a straight line. With Leah having zero control over the car, it flipped into the air and spun, landing hard back onto the racetrack with parts flying everywhere. It's not often that cars just decide to split in two and disintegrate, making this crash one for the ages. Chris Thorne was racing at the Strip at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and let's just say his gamble didn't exactly pay off. It was in the NHRA Pro Mod Eliminations at the Nevada Nationals in 2023, and Thorne was taken for a wild ride during the very first round. His car started pulling towards the center line, and at that point, Thorne knew it was going to get ugly. It suddenly snapped to the left and smashed the wall head first at an almighty speed in a very nasty impact. It flipped over instantly and spun around in the air with the front and back of the car breaking off, sending debris everywhere.
Mike Dunn's qualifying run at Orange County turned catastrophic when his crankshaft snapped. The car literally shattered mid-run, pieces everywhere. His parachute accidentally deployed, probably saving his life. His helmet bounced off that roll cage during multiple flips, but he walked away with just a sore finger.
In this case, the crankshaft broke in two pieces and with such force that it just shattered the body into 1,000 pieces. Had the parachute not deployed here, accidentally done, he would have been in bigger trouble.
When we imagine drag racing crashes, we often think of high-speed spins and tumbles with thousands of small carbon fiber pieces being sprayed everywhere. But this incident from Mike Murphy had a much tamer look. Mike set off cleanly, but within the first few feet found himself having to correct himself. But unfortunately, he lost control and slammed into his right-hand wall. The accident didn't stop there, as seemingly out of nowhere, his car burst into flames as it grinded to a halt on the raceway.
Canizo rolls sideways and into the wall is Mike Murphy, and a big fire down there as the door has come open as Murphy brings the car to a stop at the 8th mile. The fire has come way down. Thankfully, the responding team is on the scene right now.
Thankfully, Mike managed to escape and was totally okay, but still a close call nonetheless.
Another uncommon occurrence is when two drag cars collide with each other, but that's exactly what happened in Phoenix in 2018. While qualifying for the Arizona Nationals, Johnny Lindbergh and John Force had just finished their race when out of nowhere, John Force's car decided to blow up crossing the finish line. It instantly blew all the bodywork off and Force was left exposed in the cockpit. It veered across and hit the wall hard, putting him straight into the path of Lindbergh. The two of them collided and their cars were tangled together, and then both of them crashed twice at the exact same time. It is known as one of the strangest and wildest crashes in history. Clay Millican was a fan favourite when he showed up to the Milan Dragway in 2005. The main reason for this was because the Top Fuel dragster he was driving was sponsored by the Dukes of Hazzard, and his car was painted in that famous orange livery. Clay was just a good old boy, never meaning no harm, but unluckily for him, his car wasn't feeling the same towards him. Moments after he took off, the front of his car blew up into the air and flipped over in the biggest way possible, landing him on his roof. He flew up the track like this at around 200 miles per hour and crossed the finish line upside down, on his roof, travelling backwards.
Watching your car turn into confetti isn't exactly what you sign up for in drag racing. This driver's car just exploded in mid-run. Parts went flying everywhere, left him sliding down the track in what was basically just a frame with wheels. Now, if you thought the last crash was bad, get ready for one just as spectacular. In southern Georgia, at No Mercy 13, Casey Bushmeyer's Corvette takes off and immediately veers to the right before slamming into the wall and bursting into flames, all while sending carbon fibers and pressure cans skidding around on the surface.
Casey Bushmeyer hard into the wall. Here, folks, please clear the starting line. Please clear the starting line.
Although it was a pretty petrifying crash, luckily Casey walked away unscathed.
At the 2003 Super Nationals in Englishtown, New Jersey, Brandon Bernstein suffered the biggest crash in his entire career. About halfway through the pass in his Top Fuel dragster, Brandon's car went out of control when he smoked the tires just a bit too much. He overcorrected the steering, and before he knew it, his car began swerving uncontrollably across the track. It jolted violently to the left, flipped onto its side, and hit the wall extremely hard at a very scary angle, sending all the energy into the cockpit where Bernstein was sitting. Remember, these cars have carbon fiber seats with no padding at all, so it would have felt far from pleasant.
Kenny Bernstein won in the Budweiser King in the first round today. Son Brandon went for the ride of his life. The car got out of control, hit the wall hard. Brandon up and over, and from that moment on, everyone was holding their breath.
1 minute this guy's making his pass, next thing his car's acting like a plane, nose up, scattering parts before gravity kicked back in. Came down hard enough to make everyone flinch. Now, usually in drag racing, to see one car crash and slam into the wall is bad enough. But every now and again, we see an accident twice as bad involving two of them. At the World Cup finals, we saw David Farlow and Billy Colson go head to head. The pair of them were alongside one another until Farlow's car took a quick turn and struck Colson, sending both of them tumbling and out of control for another 100 feet. But luckily, amid the wreckage, both drivers managed to escape unhurt.
Another driver who had an unfortunate flip was none other than Pat Dakin, who went on this death-defying ride back in 1998. He was racing in Heartland Park, Topeka, as it was known then, in Kansas, when his Top Fuel dragster suffered this almighty blowover. He lost the front end and the car immediately flipped into the air in a blink of an eye. Pat was left wondering which way was up and which way was down. The rear wheels came off as it flipped through the air, before dramatically landing back on the ground and smashing awkwardly off the concrete wall. The impact ripped the car in two, sending parts flying everywhere as flames erupted from the wreckage. It was a brutal hit that involved a little bit of everything bad.
Tim Gross's run at the AT Spring Nationals turned into pure chaos. Hit the guardrail at full throttle and rode it like a ramp before the fuel tank went. Nothing left but burning pieces. 30 days later, he's back with a car he built himself.
Spring Nationals, Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, that's what you call getting away from you.
The worst thing that can happen is to get onto the knife edge of that guardrail, then the fuel tank explodes. Everyone holds their breath until they see Tim Gross unbuckle and run away from this.
In drag racing, the risks are well known for the drivers. They know what they're signing up to, but after all, we respect their bravery. But what we don't always appreciate is the people who capture this kind of footage to show us, like in this crash. Here we see one car lose control and slide behind his competitor before mounting on the wall amid the spray of metal all around. But remarkably, this cameraman, or woman, doesn't even flinch despite all the material flying around him, a testament to the passion and bravery these fans show.
And while we're on the page of top fuel dragsters getting airborne, here's another example, courtesy of the legendary Larry Dixon. He experienced this breathtaking crash in 2015 when racing in the first qualifying session at the NHRA Gator Nationals in Gainesville. Moments after starting his pass, the front of his car split in two out of nowhere and sent him completely vertically in a very strange accident. The car then flipped and twisted midair before crashing off the tarmac and bouncing into the concrete wall twice. The front axle of his car was left spinning on the track, hundreds of feet behind him, as debris was scattered everywhere it could possibly go.
Whoa! Larry crashes hard right at the finish line. Both cars were kind of hunting towards the center. You can see that Doug's car was moving over there.
Thanks to one brave cameraman, we get a front row view of what not to do. This driver learned why you want out of your car before the fire starts. He stayed in too long and ended up in a fireball. The camera guy kept rolling while everyone else ran.
Oh my God! No!
Go, Buster, Buster, go! Go, go!
Come on!
Hands fire! Get him! Come on, get him!
Next up, we have what I think is the most spectacular crash on the entire list, and also one of the scariest. As Crash is playing, I mean, could you imagine being the one inside this car as it flips, tumbles and twists around before landing the wrong way up with more of your car missing than still with you? I think the crowd reaction says it all.
The Gainesville track also had it out for Al Hoffman in 1997 when it served up this highlight reel crash. He was participating against Mark Oswald in the funny car final, but there was nothing funny about what happened when he reached the end of his pass. The car blew up seemingly out of nowhere and went up in a fireball in a split second. He pulled his parachute, but the car would just not slow down, sending him straight into the catch fencing in a ball of flames. He had a horrific crash over the wall as it tore up his car, and there wasn't much left of it other than the roll cage that was protecting him. But he did go out in a blaze of glory, literally, as he still won the race.
One driver thought he'd saved it after sliding across the track. Wrong. Car snapped back, caught the wall and went tumbling over the barrier. Ended up wrecking on his side after that wild ride. Next up, we have another double car pileup. Now, if you're a drag racer and you end up tumbling and spinning because you lost control, I think you'd be frustrated. But if someone else crashes into you because they lost control, it would leave a bitter taste. In this crash, the two cars set off the line, and while one of them veers ever so close to the barrier and scrapes it, he bounces off it and slides across the track before making contact with his competitor, in an incident which leaves him tumbling and turning on the wrong side of the barrier.
But check this one out. One of the strangest drag racing moments ever happened in Brainerd in 2014, when not one car crashed, but two, and they didn't even hit each other. See, when Monty Green and Don Kritsky were racing each other, neither driver came out unscathed. Monty Green lost control of his car shortly after starting his pass and started wobbling across the track. The car eventually flipped over and barrel rolled, smashing it in the process. And almost straight away after he crashed, Don Kritsky decided to do the same, slapping the outside wall hard in a big side impact. His car then flipped over, hit the wall, barrel rolled, broke into two, and went on fire for good measure. What a race.
This is Monty Green, who gets sideways first. He tips it over. This looks very, very bad, but watch Mr. Kritsky.
Don Kritsky gets into the wall, comes around, knocked the fuel line off of it, and that started a raging inferno.
Quick thinking made the difference here. When his opponent started losing it, this driver read it perfectly, yanked that wheel just in time as the other car came sliding across and avoided what could have been a nasty two-car collision. Now in this video so far, we've seen crashes, flips, tumbles and fire at breathtaking speeds. But what we haven't seen yet is all of them at once. That's exactly what went wrong for Phil LaMattina in the 2007 Top Fuel at Willowbank. Phil's dragster went airborne before flying through the sky at aeroplane speeds before bouncing, tumbling on the ground, and to top it all off, smashed into the barrier and burst into a ball of flames.
Racing driver has amazingly walked away from one of the most spectacular crashes ever seen. His dragster was rocketing along at aircraft speeds when it became airborne, split in two and burst into flames.
Luckily, Phil managed to walk away from the crash totally unscathed, miraculously I should say.
In what appeared to be a strange matchup to say the least, Rick Gorsey in his funny car was taking on Debbie Reed in her Top Fuel dragster in Willowbank Raceway's New Year series. But it turned sour pretty quickly for Debbie Reed, because near the end of her run, she lost control of her car and veered into the wall, causing a huge hit. But it got worse as the car split in two, shot across the track and hit the other wall. It caught fire, slid down the track, and without losing much speed at all, rolled over violently in the grass runoff area. She then hit yet another concrete wall at the end of the strip, creating one of the most intense crashes in drag racing history.
Danny Wilkinson's second ever race turned ugly fast. Solid passed against Caps until both rear wheels just ripped clean off. The car went airborne, crossed the track and hit the wall hard. Crowd didn't breathe until they saw him moving. Thankfully, Danny was totally okay. And if one airborne flying crash wasn't enough for his career, Phil LaMattina had a crash almost identical to his previous one in 2015. At the 2015 Fuchs W International, LaMattina's dragster caught lift, and before he knew it, all he could see was the sky as he became a complete passenger. He was lifted at least 10 feet into the air before he was shaken around until he crashed onto the floor with a shower of sparks, but luckily no flames this time. Kevin Chapman's day at Santa Pod in 2022 went south before it even started. Car self-destructed right off the line, burst into flames and started shedding parts before he even hit third gear. Sometimes drag racing decides it's not your day before you get really going. Sometimes as a drag racer, there are things you can control and things you can't. Unfortunately for Larry Dixon, the front half of your car snapping off is not one of the things you can control. So when it happened to him against Doug Kalitta in 2015, all he could do was hope.
Whoa! Larry crashes hard right at the finish line. Both cars were kind of hunting towards the center. You can see that Doug's car was moving over there.
As his car eventually landed and smashed up against the barrier, thankfully it grinded to a slow halt where Larry could get out and give the crowd and cameras a wave.
And our last crash is perhaps the most spectacular on the whole list. Driver Stevie Fast didn't think he'd be taking flight when he lined up for his run at No Mercy in 2016. But his car had other ideas. He got a great launch, but maybe it was too good, because almost instantly, his car popped a wheelie, and without a wheelie bar on these cars, it headed towards the sky. The car went completely vertical, twisted in the air, and hit the concrete wall hard. It smashed back onto the track and skated across the strip, breaking up as it slid on its roof. Fast was never as glad to be back on the ground after this wild flight.